Good afternoon, network, and thank you for joining us again this Wednesday. It is the end of the month already. Somehow, it's also the end of the quarter, which is horrifying, I'm sure, for any of us. But also good, and that means that we're doing our month-end sales panel. Super excited about these. This is I don't even know how many we've done, but many, and they've been a lot of fun. So yes, before we go around the room and introduce everybody, just a quick instruction/disclaimer on the comments. We've had a lot of participation on these episodes. Thank you for that. If you are here, please leave comments. This is going live onto LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So depending where you're coming from, sometimes your comments will get cut off, et cetera, et cetera. In the interest of confidentiality, we will not name you, so your name will not be on the video, because maybe you're supposed to be working right now and not talking to Rex like me, so I don't want to get you in trouble. But we'll happily address any of your comments that come in. If it's too long in one chat, though, it sometimes will get cut off, just FYI. Okay, disclaimer done. Very happy to have all three of you guys with me here. I would love to maybe go around the virtual room, and if you can all introduce yourselves and give the audience a little bit about what you do. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump.
I'll go first, Rick.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Dan.
All right. So my name's Dan Garcia. I've been in the staffing and recruitment and business development space for almost 13 years, I think now. I started off as an account manager, moved up to managing a team of account managers and BD people, worked as a recruiter, managed a team of recruiters, anywhere from 20 to 30 recruiters and BD people. And worked for two mid-sized firms, and now I own and operate my own staffing firm. So that's me.
And then you're in New York, yes?
And yes, and I'm based out of New York.
Because we're all over the place on this show, so thank you. Awesome. Emily, you want to take it next?
Sure. Thanks for including me here, Rick. And Dan, similar to yourself, I'm also in staffing. My name is Emily Azes. I've been in sales throughout my entire career, so about 12 years, in staffing the last 4. 3.5 of those years were in a fairly large staffing agency. And similar to Dan, I actually left and launched on my own. I have a one-woman firm focused on low volume to deliver exceptional results on the recruitment side. So doing 360 on my own. I launched about 3 months ago. And just got my first deal closed on Friday last week.
Nice. Deal number 1 of many.
You got it.
You get your boss off your back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Where are you from, Emily?
Sorry, I'm from Toronto, Canada.
Of course. Maple Leafs fan, or?
I have to be, right?
All right, we've got an original 6 matchup here between Dan in New York, myself here now in Boston.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Bruins fan, and of course Emily. Yeah. There's a lot to be spoken about if you're a sports fan, about sports and geographic region. That's how I remember people by. So I will forever remember you as a Maple Leaf fan. I'm 20 years into a career that's been a bit of a hybrid. Lots to talk about with regards to recruitment. Many of those years in manufacturing, I pivoted over actually to the HR side of the house for 4 or 5 years when a client of mine talked me into joining her team and helping roll out some systems for their organization across a couple of different business units. But most recently, worked for a business that spoke both to high volume staffing, temp staffing, if you will, or contract staffing, as well, perm placement. That's really where I spent most of my years as a business developer, looking for perm search, helping with clients make some mid to senior level placements. Now I've actually pivoted to the insurance space. So while I'm on the human capital highway, actually focus more in employee benefits. It's an area that has a growing need, and like Dan and Emily, had a decision to make earlier this year relative to whether I start my own shop, go into another organization in a more corporate search focus, or try something a little bit different. So the last 6 or 7 months, I've been focusing in on sales. I'm very much involved on the sales side of the business, but selling a little bit of a different service.
Hell yeah. Thanks, guys.
Nice.
All right. So a lot of things represented here. Obviously, we all have backgrounds in staffing for mid to larger size firms. Emily and Dan, both of you guys have launched off on your own relatively recently. Dan less recently than Emily, but still. So there's that perspective. Kevin, you're still dealing with larger companies and we're on a larger basis. So I think these questions can come from a different slant, which is partially why I selected all of you guys, which is part of the fun. Let's dive in here right off the bat on probably the hottest topic that I get talking to people about is just the market temperature check. Like, how's it been? What do we think? Is it actually getting better? Does it just look better? Or are we all just a lot busier and making the same or less money? This is my little caveat to the question here. What do you guys think?
I feel seen, Rick.
Success. Who wants to chime in on that? Yeah. Not a lot.
I can come in from my perspective. Yeah, go ahead, Emily. I'd love to hear from you, and then I can provide my perspective.
Sure. I'll speak to the Canadian market, which is where I work. I have never, in the 4 years I've been working in staffing, experienced so many candidates that have been affected by layoffs. I did not hear this many last year, not even close. I would say at least 70% of the candidates I meet with are affected by layoffs. And so there is a huge influx of candidates desperately in need of work. Thousands of applicants on one of my roles that I posted. It was up for 2 weeks. I had over 2,000 applicants on it. A second role had about 800 in 1 week. And it's really sad. It's really sad. You want to help everybody. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel that we're going to see the effects of the unemployment rates rising into next year. And hopefully there's a big correction next year. Q4 should be good. Traditionally is a great time for hiring to pick up, right? Budgets need to be spent. So fingers crossed. But it is extremely competitive. I do find that it's harder to get buy-in from the client side to need services like staffing help when, from their perspective, they have thousands of applicants as well to look through on their job postings. So it's a little bit more tactical to be going after the really niche, difficult positions that are going to be tough and that you won't likely fill within an applicant pool of people directly applying.
And just to contextualize, Emily, we're talking like those high numbers of applicants you're getting in a week or two. This is in IT recruitment.
Yes, sorry, exclusively IT is my area. Thank you for bringing that forward. I forgot to mention. Yeah, so I can't really speak to the other areas, but IT is still, I would say, more affected this year than even last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining because you've launched off on your own relatively recently, this is also direct hire IT jobs, as in perm IT.
Both. So I do both. I find direct hire is probably an easier way in because that one, they take more care. There's a lot more of a culture fit match, personality match, leadership style that you need. And so it's actually usually my way in, which is kind of pivoting to another thing, but my way into securing a new account is usually bringing forward a really good sample profile for a high level senior full-time permanent leadership position that is going to have a huge impact to the organization. That's usually how I get in the door, and then I make my agreements ideally cover both contract and full-time for other needs.
Sweet, thank you. What are you guys seeing, Kevin and Dan, in the market right now? What's your take on it?
I made my first placement here. I've been with the organization I'm with, Borslow, 6 or 7 months now. And, it happened to be somebody that I knew and introduced to our chief strategy officer, who also heads up our sales organization. And in fact, he's going to be a peer of mine and somebody that I've known for a few years. So there are industries hiring. And I think that, in our the words of a good friend from both Canada and US, Wayne Gretzky, go where the puck will be, not where it is today. And I think that we have to be more creative with finding where those organizations and industries are a little bit more dire to hire. And I think that at the end of the day, like, I can go back to the years when I was working a desk really, on a commission level, 2008, 9, 10, during the housing crisis and the international banking crisis. Like, it was hard to find a search. And I would agree, Emily, you have a candidate, you market that candidate, get yourself in the door, establish some credibility, and then you'll find your way to, either a permanent requisition that you're working on, a retainer that you're looking for, or potentially a placement with that, that NPC that you're leveraging. But going back to that original question, I do think companies are hiring. I think that there's specific industries that weren't necessarily top of mind for me, coming more out of the manufacturing area. Insurance being certainly on that list, and then there are others, especially when you start talking about IT and are we really keeping an eye on artificial intelligence, because there's a whole world of opportunity out there that not too many people understand, and I'm seeing more and more of those types of organizations marketing a growth story.
It's true.
True that.
Yeah,
True that.
for sure.
Dan, how are you feeling about stuff?
The market. So Emily, I've always done predominantly technology. I've done a little bit of accounting. I'm sure you would agree, when you do technology, you end up branching into a little bit of finance. So there's project management comes in, PMO stuff, Agile, Scrum, all that comes into play as well. But again, I've mostly done technology. So that's the space that I can speak for. Whenever I see unemployment numbers come out, from the feds, I'm always a little taken back. I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with those numbers. So I do think that we will see in the future higher unemployment, especially in the IT space. There's way more candidates on the market than certainly a year ago. Going back to COVID, I often say, obviously COVID was horrible. Right. I know people that were personally impacted. But for our business, COVID was the best thing I have ever experienced for our business. It allowed people to be 100% remote, so you could get the best talent in the world, and especially in the country. And as long as they were willing to work a certain time zone, they were employable. So your candidate pool was just enormous. Certainly not. We're certainly not in those days anymore. Unemployment,
No.
from all the candidates I speak to, it's crazy, and more people are getting laid off every day. But I can say that I have right now 6 consultants on billing, and I've done 2 full-time placements in the past 4 or 5 months. So as when you have your own company, I'm very happy with those numbers. Would I be happy with those numbers if I was working for a big firm again? Maybe not. They might not be happy with those numbers, but so there are opportunities out there, and for people like us, for salespeople in this industry, I just lean on my network, and like I've always done.
100%.
And for candidates, it's much harder. You need to stand out. You need to be top of your game. So I do feel genuinely for all of the candidates that are constantly reaching out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So let's dig in on that a little bit then. In general, I feel like there's a few. You mentioned COVID, and all of us have mentioned sort of the ups and downs we've had. So you got COVID that happens, which changes the game in one very big way. Then there's a reactionary sort of swing to, okay, now we're opening back up again. We're hiring like crazy. We're still kind of remote. We don't know what's going on. So we're all making gangbusters. Anybody who's in staffing pretty deep was just kind of like laughing our way to the bank. Sidebar, I paid for my second wedding, actually, in 2021 in cash, which was amazing. So that's just a nice year. It feels good. But that, of course, is not normal.
No.
And yes, there's going to be a market correction, but I don't think it's as simple as that. And I'd love your take on this, you guys, because there's a lot of other things at play. So there's the COVID swing one way, then the other, and then now the sort of inevitable fallout from that. But we've also got, and Kevin, you brought this up, we've also got AI, which in the tech space is probably going to change the way that companies run process automation increasingly, which will then mean that a lot of jobs that prior were considered to be, we needed to refill them and either shrink or whatever, will be abolished potentially or whatever. So some of the older positions will be abolished. New ones will open up. Will there be as many? We don't know. So there's a sort of a tectonic plate shifting in one direction there. So some of this stuff is not just a market correction of people's salaries and whatever. It's also a change in what jobs will exist potentially. So there's that sort of existential quotient to it. You've also got the aging population, lots of retiring people at the top of the chain, and that's going to increase in intensity over the next few years. Some absurd numbers that I were reading were like people hitting retirement age between 2025 and 2030 is approximately a little less than a third of the workforce, certainly in Canada, that are going to be reaching retirement age. What that means for will they retire? We don't know, but still, that's a giant chunk of the topper echelon, the upper tranche of people often in organizations that will be gone. And then the number of people aged, let's say 20, 21 years old, 18 to 20, who actually even have an interest in the traditional job market at all is at an all-time low, right? Like people don't want to be even teachers or professionals. They want to work part-time and do kind of a gig thing for God knows how many years. So there's a lot of stuff. How do you guys feel about all these things converging over the next few years and how that's going to impact? It's a giant question, but do you feel like these things we're starting to see them now? Have we not seen it at all? Will it be years? How do you feel about all this stuff?
That is a loaded question.
It is a very loaded question. Any thoughts, opinions? You can let it stew and we can move on.
I mean, I can tell you, I just had a conversation this morning with someone who said, I'm gonna in 11 months I'll be able to collect Social Security, and and he said, but I'm not gonna retire because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
Because I can't retire. So until they, he said, until I'm laid off, until they try to, escort me out, I won't get into ageism or anything right now, but I mean, he and I had that discussion, and I hear that from a lot of people that just because I can retire financially, well, not financially, but because I hit that certain age, right? A lot of people can't, and you see a lot more people taking on second jobs because they're making less money in their full-time jobs, So you're going to see a lot more of that. Just because people get to retirement age doesn't mean they can retire. People are living longer. People want better health insurance longer because they're living longer. To your point about people wanting, younger generation, Gen Y, and the whole gig economy, I get asked by parents all the time, like, "Hey, my kid wants to do this, or what do you recommend?" And oftentimes their kids just want to try things out and explore, and they want to be, take a sabbatical, for a year and be a yoga instructor. And so I don't know if mom and dad can afford for their kids to do that. That's great. I know mine couldn't. But I think you get hit with a reality check at some point. So if you're in IT, I know plenty of people just coming out of school, and I tell people you don't even need to get a degree. If you're really that good, if you're an amazing coder, you can get a job and you don't need a college degree. Chances are you've probably built, quite a few products that speak volumes to your level, to your work, more so than any degree is going to offer. But I think, again, Gen Y, if you want to just try things out, eventually, if you have to pay rent, it becomes a reality check. But that's my opinion.
For sure. I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. And then in terms of the AI thing, I look up some of these numbers for fun every once in a while. One of the examples that I saw on the work from home /AI front that was very interesting was sort of Ernst & Young did a study earlier this year just about like the general job economy. What are positions mostly hybrid? Where are they work from home? In 2023, it was something along the lines of 35-ish% of roles in the US were fully remote, which is abnormally high compared to historically. And then it shrank at the beginning of 2024 to 1% from 35%, which was an astronomical shift in just a few months. To everybody was like, "Nah, we're going back to hybrid." Everybody's got and IBM was the company who invented work from home, right? Who invented telecommuting at the time in the 70s. Everybody had to go hybrid. There was a company-wide thing, meaning it's like even high up people in the company. I moved away from a major town. It's like, cool. Well, then you've moved away from this job if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
It was that strict. So there's that whole piece. And meanwhile, a lot of AI positions are the forecasted numbers of positions that will be abolished at a company like IBM is higher by several times than the number that they've laid off in the past year. So this is also like a pretty big shift in what we call jobs, like what jobs are. Do you
Mhm.
feel like these types of things are going to really affect sales, or do you feel like sales is sales, tried and true? We stick to our guns. How do you guys feel about that affecting what we do every day as salespeople?
It's a relationship business, right?
Yeah. I
So
don't think
if you don't have the relationship, your phone's not going to ring.
that's it. I think we'll be using AI in our work a lot more. And if you're not, you already should be, because you're probably falling behind. I'm sure everyone's heard that already. I think it'll be a combination of the human and AI working together to deliver a better service. But ultimately, like Kevin said, sales in any industry, whatever you're selling, product, service, whatever, it's all about relationships. And people work with who they like. There's a lot of people that offer the same service. And I often used to train my team to say, you're out there to make a friend. And that's really what it is. And when you can be empathetic and put yourself in the position of your client and be service oriented and customer focused, that's really hard to do with a robot. They can do a lot, but empathy is not a strong suit for AI, and very intense problem solving and collaboration that's involved in our roles. I mean, AI is going to be helpful to a certain degree, but I think you're always going to need that human there as well.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree.
I was on a call just before I came on board onto this chat, and somebody said AI creates and we curate, right? So it's kind of a slick way of looking at it, but let's use it for efficiency gains, and also this is a human business, and frankly, you're going to be needed.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
No question.
Yeah. And when we place humans too, I mean, I just can't imagine any organization trusting AI to hire a person for their team without a human involvement. But you never know. Been surprised before.
I would hope no organization is trusting AI to hire a human being for their team. But it is shocking, the ATS systems, right? That these major companies use, and they do allow the ATS systems to screen for the most part. And I constantly see excellent candidates not even get through the ATS system because they didn't have enough keywords on their resume.
Yeah.
So, I think us in this business are going to be replaced by AI. I hope not, and certainly I don't think it will happen anytime in the very near future. But I already see companies leaning on it, and there's companies, literally startups out there, AI and machine learning startups, trying to replace us right now, and they're hiring recruiters for their company, which I find is so ironic that they're building a product to replace recruiters, yet they need recruiters to find people to build the product.
Yeah, irony of ironies.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
I've often sold with the analogy around a golf bag. You don't use one club the entire round. You have 13 clubs in a bag, and you sometimes use one more than others. But at the end of the day, that is a club that will be used, and frankly, it will be used more and more as it becomes ironed out, sophisticated, so forth. And we are still a big club in that bag that will forever be needed. And I go back to the 2008, 9, 10 crisis again, and remember those days where you'd make 100 calls and you'd get really little to show for it. And yeah, you do have to answer your first question, Rick. Are we working harder and making less? Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, let's
let's
call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
My hope is that, it's one thing. Some people say like, okay, all these jobs are getting replaced in AI, and AI can do the work of, screening. I disagree, but to your point, Dan, a lot of ATSs are screening, certainly in larger companies, and AI bots are doing sort of like pre-screening questions that are automatically getting sent out to people to filter them down before they even speak to a human, even for those who make the triage of the resume. So there's a lot of stuff like that. But I feel like the job market itself is going to change so much. Like, I feel like we're getting to a tipping point where people are going to ask themselves a question: what's a job I need to hire a human for? What qualities do they need to possess? a lot of stuff, like when we, if you were really good at adding and subtracting, that was a key quality at some point in the post-industrial revolution.
Yeah.
But when everybody has scientific calculators, it's no longer valid. So like the nature of what a job, what a desirable quality is to work in a company changes. And I feel like once that shifts drastically, this is an opportunity, I think, for all of us to like focus more on the things that humans are good at. Like you mentioned before, Emily, empathy, or like negotiation skills, problem solving, creativity, imagination, all that stuff will ostensibly not ever be done, hopefully in our lifetimes, by machines until, of course, they take over like Skynet style.
Yeah, absolutely. The soft skills, right? I mean, I'd say if I was going to give any advice to candidates right now in this market who are actively looking for work, come on and smile when you join the interview. Small talk.
Yes.
Engage with the person behind the computer, because you do need to stand out. You really need to wow us and any organization in this market. And I'll tell you, in the first 2 minutes, I usually know if I'm interested or not, based on, did this person come on time? Is their camera on right away? Are they smiling? Are they engaging? Do they ask me how I'm doing? Can they small talk in the beginning of this conversation? Because if not, I don't want to feel awkward putting this person in front of my client, knowing that they can't even, ask how the weekend was or get personal at all, right? So it's an absolute non-negotiable. You have to come in your best foot forward and get out of your comfort zone. Either you're shy or introverted, and really push yourself to try and find common ground, do your research on who you're meeting beforehand, so you can ask a research question. People love to talk about themselves. So you come on a meeting and say, hey, I really love the post you made on LinkedIn about XYZ. That person's automatically going to feel good about you right off the hop. So the little things matter. A lot of candidates will come in and talk right about all of their experience and how well it suits to the role. And if someone does that right off the hop, it's almost an automatic no for me.
That's a good point. Soft skills feel like they are undervalued right now across the board. Am I nuts, or underdeveloped?
I don't think so at all. Actually, I think it may not be. Maybe you're not talking about that in a job description. Usually, there's not. Okay, should have soft skills. I want you to be able to. But what I tell everyone, and even my clients, is listen. I could find you just for whatever, a Java developer. I could find you a great Java developer, and they work. And I don't want to name clients or companies, but they worked for this major investment bank, and they were excellent, and everyone loved them. But if I give them to you, you might not like them at all, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I can tell you, I know they could get the job done, but everyone in this company, everyone in this particular group is going to find that they're not the same cultural fit, or the right, quote unquote, right cultural fit. So soft skill, and at first company A, right? They just wanted the Java developer to sit there, code, didn't really need to interact with the front office, or not working with traders. And that's why they were so successful over at company A. Company B, you're going to be working with traders. It's front office, so you're going to be coding and doing a lot of other things. That requires soft skills. Yeah. That's never mentioned in the job description at either company. So that's where we come in, right? Where we are having those conversations with the managers. And we're really saying, like, what is really important here? And that's when we start talking about the soft skills. And can you read a room? That's my big thing all the time. Is if you mention soft skills, to me, that's number one. Is can you read a room? Know who do you need to talk to? You automatically know in a meeting with executives, right? You kind of have a good idea of who's the major decision maker here, right? Maybe I need to speak to that person. I definitely need that person's buy-in versus that person. And Emily, to your point earlier, though, I say the same thing to candidates, even on phone screens. If you're on the phone with someone and you smile while talking, it sounds different. It literally sounds different on the other end. So I tell people that all the time. Video, phone, whatever the interview, it's hard enough to get a job. So you need to do every single thing possible, especially now.
Yeah.
From a sales perspective, in our positions, it's a unique thing that we do in recruitment, where we obviously sales is cold outreach or warm outreach to clients to sell ourselves as partners and service and so on. But we are also selling potential opportunities to candidates. Do you feel like there are or what kind of challenges have you guys been seeing in both, like on the client side, but also in selling jobs to candidates that you you feel they may be good for? Any kind of things that have changed 2024, challenges you're seeing, or things that have improved, hopefully over time as well, would be nice.
I think it shifts based on the market if you have to sell more to the client or sell more to the candidate, right? So in this market today, there's less of a need to sell to the candidate because the candidates are more dire and desperate to get the job. And you have more of a need to sell to the client. Whereas, COVID days, like Dan said, when our business was booming, you really had to sell it to the candidate. They had 3, 4 other opportunities in front of them at any given time if they were good. And, I think part of the sales on both sides is keeping everybody in the loop, being fully transparent, being trustworthy and honest. So one thing I tell everyone that works with me is I will not over promise and under deliver. So candidates, if I'm not going to represent you, I will tell you exactly why. And if I am, I'm going to tell you where I think you match against the others in my pool, and why I won't put you at the top end of budget. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like there's honesty and transparency on both sides. And I think that builds the relationship, which then has the candidate more invested in working with you. Even though, yes, you're selling them the job, but there is a huge component of who's your staffing partner that's managing the process and how are they using psychological, working patterns to make sure that they're keeping you engaged and answering all of your questions, asking questions you hadn't even thought about, right? There's that level too. How are you going to make a decision if you have 3 offers in front of you at the same price, right? That's what's most important to you. So really getting people to think deeply about what they want and not pushing them in one way or another. I think that's a big one too. So, and this works client or candidate side, but hey, if this is not for you, absolutely no hard feelings, right? That's okay. Not everyone should work together, right?
Yeah.
It is a numbers game. And so I always just ask for transparency and I'll give the same back to you.
No, I would say, I always tell my clients, and I truly believe this, and I've had clients. So I always say I'm not in sales. I don't like it. I know we are though. Ultimately, it's sales, right? We are, but I just never like the word because it always reminds me that I always feel in the back of my mind that like I might be selling cars, and not that there's anything wrong with that either. I just bought a car, right? I like the sales guy, but that has always been stuck in my mind. So I never sell anyone, a candidate. I've always said this. I won't sell them on a roll. I won't do that. But I will help them weigh the pros and cons. And sometimes, Emily, like you said, it's just not for them, right? Like your opportunity, they're presented with a much better opportunity. Yeah. Same money. My job's 100% in office. The other job's 100% remote. I would run to the remote job. Yep. I think most people would. I'm not going to talk you out of that, provided it's a good company, solid, good opportunity. I'll help them weigh the pros and cons. Hope they do really well. I hope they start hiring candidates from me in the future, and you keep the relationship.
You keep the relationship. Totally. Like what if you have a candidate who's in line for a role at AWS and you're working with a startup, right? I would question why that candidate would go with me. Now I don't trust them all of a sudden, because if I were you, I'd be taking that other job, right? Like it's just putting yourself in their position and really thinking about what would I do in this position? And humanizing it, right? Getting on their level.
Yeah. And it's weird you hear, because it used to just be years ago, right? I thought I was naive. I was young when I started in this business and I was just like, oh, everyone's motivation is probably money. And now years later, I'm like, wait a minute, I have kids, I have priorities, and money is like, it's obviously something. If you're in sales, it means something to you, but money's just enables me to do all the other things that I really love to do. So my time is worth more than my money now, right? If I have more time, Kevin, you mentioned golf. I love to play golf. If I had a little bit more time to play golf, that works for me too. If I could work with, if the PGA, right, wanted to hire me, I would take a huge pay cut for some tickets to the Open and things like that. But people's motivations, I will tell you, in this business, it's crazy what motivates people.
Yeah.
It's not always the things you think. And culturally, right, like that's huge. Different cultures have different motivations. I've learned that. never not entertaining in this
It's
business.
absolutely the same thing on the buyer side, right? So you have your candidates and then you have your clients, and some clients are motivated by bottom line savings, and others are motivated by fit for their team as they're trying to replace somebody that didn't work well with the 3 or 4 key leaders around that table. It could be, it could be a bit of technology that they need. It depends, right? And it really comes down to, and I appreciate what you said, Dan, around not wanting to be a sales guy. I think we all are at times. Everybody in the world is a sales guy.
Yes, you have to sell yourself every day.
We're always selling. We're always selling our spouse on where we want to go to dinner or not go to dinner, or kids as to what we're going to have them do or not do. Like, it's a sales game. Everybody's in it. But if you have the relationship established, everybody coalesces around the decision, and it becomes a little less sticky, like a used car sale.
For sure. I'll take a moment to read out some of these comments that we got, which one person popped in here with, Emily, my hat off to you for starting in this market. Best of success. So that's a fan of yours, Emily. I imagine that also goes for you, Dan, because you also started in this market. And then someone who said transparency. That is very important that you brought up before, Emily. I mean, we all sort of were nodding our heads off over here, the three of us, and I'm sure people are at home or on lunch as well. It's amazing how the distrust of recruiters is based on the lack of that transparency, and just offering that up front. Still, people are often shocked, which saddens me a little bit, because it's like, do other recruiters not talk to you like this at all? Like, have you? And it doesn't seem like it. It still seems a little.
Yeah, I think 90% of the recruiters in this business, I don't care what segment of the business, what industry, you shouldn't be in this business. Like 90,
I agree with
95.
Oh my goodness. I think bad habits were created when the years that were leading up to 2023, where it was just like, there were people in this industry that just had never had hardship. The worst that they dealt with was a candidate that ghosted them. And it was like, oh my God, I was just ghosted. I'm like, you've got to work on the relationship and they won't ghost you. I mean, everybody's been ghosted before, but yeah, you're right. Like, there's been a lot of lazy people that have just sort of flung things against the wall and hope something stuck. It definitely put a bad mark on our space for those that do it the right way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But then it also becomes easy to differentiate, right? By simply doing those things, being transparent, saying why you want to represent somebody or not, where you think they fit into the market, so that they can have benchmarking information that's valuable for them, even if it's not what they want to hear. Being able to tell people things they don't want to hear, but still maintain the relationship is a very good example of that kind of dialectical, relational thing humans can do and AI cannot, which could be really transformative and helpful to a candidate too. Just even telling them that bad news, but contextualizing why their expectation wasn't realistic, for example, all that stuff.
Yeah, you have to provide, and on the candidate side, you have to provide real feedback. I say I sugarcoat it to an extent, right? I want my client to feel that they can tell me anything, may not be, entirely HR. Maybe if HR heard that, they might have a problem, but the conversations I have with my clients are, one-on-one conversations, right? So, but I want to be able to provide real feedback to my candidates. And I want them to know that any feedback they get from me is real and constructive. And I want them to go and use that on their next interview. And I hope they get the job on their next interview. I've said that for years. Don't BS your candidates. You're not doing them any favors, but by making them feel good.
Yep, right. For sure. Let's get into, we're 40 minutes in, and I'd love to get into this. Can be some of the juicy topics, is outreach. So we're in sales. There's a lot of different approaches. There's a lot of different tools. I've always been of the mind, as somebody who came from tech sales, and I was a startups guy. I owned my own record label for a while, and I started a piece of software that went nowhere because that's why I'm here. But point is, I found recruiting and enjoy it. But coming from different kinds of sales, I started in recruitment in my 30s, right? So it's like I'd already done a bunch of other stuff. I feel like there is a bit of a lack of sales training in recruiting, where people are often just like, you did great as a recruiter. Now you're in sales. Call clients. And it's, are you good? Well, how many clients did you sign on? 8? That's not bad. 10? You're better. You're better at sales. It's very black and white, right? It's not nuanced. Often there are definitely good sales trainers out there, but you know what I'm saying? So now I feel like there's a mishmash of a lot of different opinions as to what works. I was recommended on a prior episode of this show to buy this book, which I did. I have not read it yet. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but
I have heard of it, yeah.
But adorbs. I don't know. I mean, how do you guys feel with everything that's going on? People think cold calling. What do you guys do? What works? What's annoying that you don't like? There's people with the pet peeves. How do you feel about the outreach piece?
I mean, you gotta call, especially if it's cold, right? Like if you don't have a relationship, you don't have someone that can introduce you. That's ideally first, right? Okay, if you're targeting an organization, you want to be onboarded as a partner. You know they're going to be a good lead. First of all, who do you know there that might be able to connect the dots, have a honest conversation with them, see what they need. How can we bridge some similarities and a mutual connection to make this a warmer intro? But if you don't know anyone, I do think you should be leveraging, hitting them on all points. So there should be some email, there should be some LinkedIn, there should be some phone, but you don't want to call someone every day, you'll get blocked. You don't want to email someone every day, you'll get blocked. So there's a finesse to it. Usually my approach, the first time I am targeting someone, I will send them a LinkedIn connection request with a little message in that box. I will also call them. If they did not answer the phone, I won't leave a message, but I'll send an email explaining why I connected with them on LinkedIn. And then my next touch points after that are almost exclusively trying to get them on the phone. The reason being, once you have someone on the phone, they can hear the human behind, and you can hopefully connect with them, use your research again to connect with them and make them feel like you're not pushing a sale, right? Just coming from a place of authentically trying to help them, trying to solve a problem, asking for them to help you when you have a candidate that's in need of work, right? So being vulnerable, being empathetic, and connecting with them on the phone. I mean, that's how I have grown any business I've been involved in, or in person, but in our business and staffing, a lot of this is done over the phone. So I do think you have to call to really get a response, or for them to feel connected enough to you for them to even show up to a meeting.
And you're saying cold call clients. Obviously, I'm with you on that. Candidates, do you feel candidates are responsive to cold calling, or how do you handle the candidate side?
No, I usually do LinkedIn outreach through Recruiter for my initial, touch point, and then get them on a video call. Anyone who I did, want to meet with. But no, I don't feel, at least in this market, that you do need to be blasting cold calls for candidates. There's a lot of them out there. And so usually when you send some messages, you're going to get some quick responses and some meetings booked quickly. Right now, it's less of a pain point to have the proper candidates, at least for me, in this market, than it is to find the jobs.
Understood. Dan, Kevin, how do you guys feel about the outreach piece, sales outreach? How's it changed? What do you like? What do you dislike?
Go ahead, Dan.
All right. Well, I have felt for at least the past 2 years, because the market that's when the market, what I saw, really changed. Past 2 years. I lean on the network, and I've always said this, but more so than ever. My clients call me. I almost all the jobs, it's, hey, Dan, you have this exclusive because we've seen what you've done for the past 10 years with us, or 5 years. And then I say to them, all right, well, who else do you know? You're top of your industry. I know you know other people top of your industry. That's the easiest way to start, right? I tell everyone, start there. If you're starting from scratch, though, right? And I think that's the conversation. What would you do if you were in this business and you were starting from scratch in this really shitty economy that we're in? You could call it whatever you want, but for us, it's not what it was 2 years ago. You have no other choice but to cold call. You can't say, I'm not doing that. Because if you're going to be like that, then this isn't the business for you. It just isn't.
Yeah.
When I first started, 13 years ago, my boss handed me a cranes list from the prior year. So it's probably out of date. And it was this big, it was this huge magazine. I never knew what a cranes list was. And she had piles of them. And she said, pick an industry and then just go on LinkedIn and cold call every manager in IT at that company. And the first industry I picked, because I thought I might be a lawyer and ended up here, was legal. So I ended up working with all of the top AM law firms, placing their IT people. So, and it was all through cold calling, and then it just spread. So you have to, and Emily, you said you just have to be a human. So like when I call people, I call them and I speak to them the way if someone called me, how, I might respond to them. Every now and then someone calls me and I stay on the phone with them. Maybe I buy their product. And if they're really bad, I tell them why, they're bad, and then I hang up.
Give feedback.
You have to cold call. Yeah, you have to cold call. It's just part of the business. It is what it is.
Yeah.
If it's not for you, then neither is the business.
Yeah. And you got to laugh it off when you get hung up on or sworn at.
Oh,
and all
yeah.
that happens. It's just part of it. It's a numbers game.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that has that. I feel like there's like a bald guy complex that I'm like, they just don't like bald people. I don't know. like just loosen up, like have a laugh, right?
Yeah. I usually text it in my family chat to give everyone else a good laugh too.
Yeah. I was just somebody just
this is new. Haven't been told this yet.
Yeah.
Yes. The new curses, the new swearing, like the phrases I've heard people come at me with, and I'm just like, wow, I didn't have people think things out.
Any good ones? We can say them here. I'm not going to bleep you.
I
always am grateful. Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was going to say it's usually the Irish. The Irish have like the greatest way of swearing at you. I'm part Irish. I feel like I could say that, but yeah, they're very creative. I would say
colorful about it. Yeah,
very colorful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Irish. If they're Irish, they're 4 or 5 hours out in front of us, and they're probably at a bar, having a pint of Guinness. But
they're a fifth of gin deep by the time we hit noon. Changes the cold a little bit.
Yeah.
I will take a contrarian approach to sort of, do you cold call candidates anymore? And I go back again to the days where really, there were again an abundant supply of candidates, and oftentimes we were asked by. And I made placements on candidates that were gainfully employed, because when we were marketing them to a client or a potential prospect, we were saying, hey, listen, you're not going to find this person on the job boards, or they're not applying to your job, or, frankly, they're not even active on LinkedIn that much. So the fact of the matter is they trust me. They're interested in your story. Can I get you, a cup of coffee set up with them? Like that worked for me. And help plug some holes that existed in the revenue dip that I was suffering through during the tougher market. So that's just, keep in mind that there could be some really good gainfully employed candidates that you could market that obviously have really tight relationships with you.
100%. Yeah. 100%. In terms of outreach tools, there's a lot of, I want to say it's a hot topic, mostly of people complaining, a lot of email sequencing tools. So a lot of AI-driven email sequencing stuff out there. Content that I get on the regular in my inbox seems like the sequence just gets more mad at me, or like more guilt-tripping. And it's like, I don't know you at all. This is something I like to call, instead of outreach, I call it poutreach. Like they start pouting immediately as soon as you don't respond. I feel like that's got to go. I don't understand what sales managers are greenlighting this content, because I feel like it really craps all over your brand, to use a crass metaphor. Like it's just not how are you building a relationship by getting angry at strangers? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know. I have a lot of this, or
I've heard a lot of people using these LinkedIn automation tools that will, automatically add somebody and then send a first message when they accept, and then create their profile for you, and then send a follow-up with another message if they don't answer that one. And it's a no from me. Again, this is a human to human business. That's terrifying. And I want to connect with who I'm going to work with. This is a very personal business. Who I'm working with, I want to enjoy my time as well. And I was going to go back to the cold call. When you get hung up on, or someone's being rude to you, swearing at you, I'm grateful they showed me that in the beginning, because I don't want to work with anyone that's going to treat somebody that way at all. Even if it's, a salesperson that's annoying, calling you out of the blue. So I consider it like dating, right? Just as much as you're evaluating, or the client's evaluating you and your service, I am evaluating them as well. I want to work with people I enjoy working with, and I want to work with great companies with good cultures and good leaders, right? Because it doesn't serve us well to place somebody with a leader who's rude, lacks empathy, and will make their lives miserable too. You're just going to be spinning your wheels. when they don't succeed or they don't stay very long, it's going to affect your reputation, right? They left very early, and it all falls back on the recruiter for finding that person when sometimes it's the hiring manager. So I just want to go back to that and say, if someone hangs up on you or is rude, just be grateful and move on. There's more prospects out there.
Yeah.
Some people would say keep calling them back if you want. For me, I'm like, I used to do that, but now I just say I don't actually want to work with somebody who's going to treat me that way. And how hard would it be to actually work with this person if this is how hard it is to just even have a 5-second conversation on the phone?
Yeah.
Sorry, Rick, I think I got off topic.
No. That's great. That's awesome. This is the topic. Sales panel. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone using the automation, the sequencing automation and liking it?
No.
Yes, but on a low volume. Like I'm using HubSpot sequences on a low volume. So if I can't keep up with it manually, it's too much. In other words.
Yeah.
So I'll do batches of 10 or 15, especially, but it'll be very, very specific. Like I'll find people that have just landed in their role within a certain niche, and that those are the types of people that I'm going to. So yeah, I can get 10 or 15 emails if I can hit one button, and then I'll have 10 or 15 conversations, like, or outbound calls. But it's not like 1,500 emails where these people are 5,000 in the thousands, just to check a box and say I have 5,000 outreaches today. Like that doesn't really. It wouldn't work for me as a manager. It wouldn't work for me as a sole proprietor. It wouldn't work for me in the business I'm in today. But to a point, yes. But it has to be paired with the manual.
Yeah.
And I have friends across the board that are saying they're having way more success than they ever did cold calling. So cold calling isn't dead. It's just cold calling with intent.
I think less people are doing it
Yep.
now. I really do. I think less people are getting on the phone. Whereas, at least when I started, that was pretty much it. It was way more cold calling than anything else, and it's kind of switched, right? It's let's try everything else instead of cold calling because we don't want to do that. But I think cold calling works. I would say the only issue I have with cold calling is that it's much harder to get real phone numbers than it used to be. That's my only issue. If I would never get off the phone if I knew if someone could offer me a list and they could guarantee me that even 80% of the phone numbers on that list were real and I was gonna get that person I wanted to get, I can't tell you how much I would pay for that.
Yeah,
I would never get off the phone. But it's much harder nowadays.
Yeah.
Your best bet I've found, I haven't tried all services for that, but my best I've found has been about 50%, which is still not bad. 50% is okay. Like it's not the end of the world, but yeah.
What are y'all using? If you don't mind me asking, I'd love to compare.
Yeah, I've tried a few. I was using Zoom info at my previous organization. I liked Zoom. I know it's expensive. I'm playing around with Seamless AI right now. Not as user-friendly, but more cost-effective. I'm still looking into what my permanent tool will be. So this is great, Kevin. Thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, Apollo AI for me is free and has got me a fair amount. I don't know if there's comparable data points, Canada versus US, but I was not a fan of anything other than Zoom. And then they were like, "Why don't you try Apollo AI?" And I was like, "It's actually pretty cool." So
Yeah,
I've been pleasantly surprised. How about you, Dan?
Zoom has always been the go-to. Like that's always what I've used. I've never used Apollo AI. I already jotted it down. So you're saying, and if it's free is for me. So why not? I'll try that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'll try.
Yeah. And I've had two people that were on my team prior, like you both, have gone out and said, "Screw it, we're going after our own business. We're going to do it ourselves." And I was like, "Oh, try this tool out, try that tool out." And they've both been like, "Yeah, thanks for the intro on that." But LinkedIn Sales Navigator too, for those that aren't using Sales Navigator and they're only in the LinkedIn Recruiter side of the portal, like I've been blown away from my recruiter's perspective of how much you can pull out of Sales Navigator beyond that of what you get from LinkedIn Recruiter. And obviously the price point is so much different than what we're seeing on the recruiter side.
But don't you need both? Don't you need Recruiter? Or you're saying you can use Sales Nav to recruit?
If I was bootstrapping, I would say you could get what you need out of Sales Navigator. But I mean, Recruiter, I spent 10 plus years using LinkedIn Recruiter and I became an addict of LinkedIn Recruiter. Like I couldn't function without it. So
I don't have it.
come across.
They've been trying to sell it to me. I have colleagues in the industry. I have a partner that I work with, and she's been trying to sell it to me. Pitch. She's like, "I'll pay for you." I was like, "I don't need it." I was like, "I'm very successful without it." Now, when I had a firm paying for it, by all means, pay for it. Like, but when you have to pay for it on your own, it's extremely expensive. So I think I have like the one next level of LinkedIn.
Premium.
Premium. Yeah,
what it means is that you have to be so calculated and direct in your messages. But I've always been that way. I've never done the whole cast the wide net. I don't do that. I've always taught recruiters not to do that. So for me, it's always worked. People answer my messages, therefore I get my messages back.
Yeah.
So those people that send me the really crappy messages, and I can tell I'm one of 10,000, I go through and I'm like, do I decline without responding so they lose their message? Or, you know what I mean? And if you give me a good one, I'll respond and say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But if you give me one of 10,000 crappy ones, then I just decline, and I know it's, and they lose their message.
Yeah.
So it's like, just be better at your job. Put a little bit more effort in,
For sure. I think Recruiter, I've actually heard, I know we're coming to the close here, but do you guys also feel like, I don't use Recruiter either voluntarily. I stopped using it because I actually felt that the sort of Boolean search functionality was delivering diminishingly accurate results. It was giving me a lot of the same results. And then simply by Googling people, by using ChatGPT to source for different companies, I was getting hundreds of results in the areas I was looking for that were spot on matches that you'd figure would have come up, that were relatively in my network within a few degrees, and that I was simply not getting. And I'm like, I am not going to pay $10,000 or say that my team should have $10,000 a year or whatever else in expenditure if it's simply not returning the results. And apparently there have been some back-end changes onto who uses the database and whatever else. We're on LinkedIn right now. So they're probably recording this and they're like, this guy's not allowed to do these on LinkedIn anymore. I feel Sales Navigator gives you better information is all I'm saying, Kevin. I agree with you. I still pay for premium, but Recruiter, there's a change I find that's happened in the past year or so in the results that you're getting. And that's everything. That's you know what I mean? I don't know if you guys have noticed the same if you're using it, but that was my 2 cents.
I mean, I'm only 3 months in. I panicked and just bought it thinking I have to.
So, Emily, do you have Recruiter, like full-on Recruiter, or do you have Recruiter Lite?
$780 a month, Dan. That's what it cost me. Yeah.
So I just checked. So I use Recruiter Lite, and it's certainly not $780 a month.
Oh yeah, no, I got the full Recruiter. I just was like, I didn't want to be held back by what I thought was one of the more important features to have, and it was just what I was used to. It wasn't something I was trying to learn right now at the start.
I mean, the recruiter side of things is definitely going to provide you almost like a database-like feature system where you can manage the projects, you can collate and whatnot. So,
and I use projects for sales too, right? If I have an MPC, I make a project for anyone hiring in that, and I leverage Recruiter for both, similar to how you're using Sales Nav for both.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. Well, we are coming to a close. Our last couple of comments people had. We had one. There's a lack of training in all roles in recruitment, which I love.
Yes.
How do you guys feel about that? I mean, everyone here, I think, minus me, I've done less management, but you guys have all managed teams. Do you feel like the training's always been lacking? Are there different things you would train people on today?
I think it's lacking because owners of firms, right? Because I haven't trained people or managed people when I am the sole owner of the firm. So I've always worked for an owner and I manage people under that owner. And I totally agree with that. Distinct lack of training in all roles in recruitment and even sales, I would say, for the most part. Owners expect return on their investment way sooner than they should. You could make better recruiters and even weed out the bad ones, and better salespeople and weed out the bad ones if you gave them more time. Everyone wants someone who can hit the ground running. If you want to train someone from scratch out of school, you have to invest the time with them. Take them to the meetings, make introductions, let them see how every aspect of the business works. You can't expect people to come in 30 days, be a solid recruiter. It's just not going to happen.
There should be more shadowing, pairing up new people with experience. and for a long time, sales, recruiting, etc. Right? You can slowly graduate somebody out of that. But yeah, I agree. It's people try and rush the process, and there's high turnover, and they don't make target and layoffs and whatever else. So shadowing, if I was going to say one improvement for anyone who's leading sales or recruiting right now, is to buddy up your junior people with your senior, so that they get a clear understanding of what a full day looks like when you are, at that level, and then also what's expected. And it just takes a long time to learn. It just does. You have to be following somebody who knows what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it is fun though. It can be fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also there's always problem solving. Like, you learn something new every day in this business pretty much, and you'll get thrown different situations all the time that you haven't faced before. And so there's an element of needing to be a human problem solver. I always say I don't staff sales for this reason. I think it's the hardest skill set to hire for. I think it's something that people have inherently in them. And it's really difficult to find that on LinkedIn. So for me, I don't do sales staffing. I have lots of great recommendations for people that do, and referrals. But yeah, I think it's the hardest skill set to staff.
As a caveat to what I said before, I do staff salespeople only, pretty much, and salespeople in recruiting only as a rec-to-rec. So that's perhaps why I don't find LinkedIn Recruiter as useful. It's impossible to tell on LinkedIn if they're a good candidate for me or not. So
Makes sense, Rick.
Caveat for me there. Kevin, you were going to say in terms of training and what have you, based on what you've seen and how you feel, anything different you would train people on, or how do you feel about training?
It's just learn about where they've come from and what their story is. And it's 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything, really, truly, to be an expert. And if we are out there selling and consulting and selling our service as an expert, it takes time, right? You can get some quick wins along the way to becoming an expert, but it's going to take time to do it, in a sustainable fashion. So yeah, I agree with the group here, is that sometimes we give up on good people too quickly. I actually have some really good success stories of recruiters that I pulled in that were on a PIP from a sales team that became some of my best recruiters. So I do think there's a lot to unpack. Perhaps a segue to, wrapping it up and parking this for another great lunch chat for another group.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. It's been lovely having you. Thanks for everybody who's watching. If you're watching this afterwards, please feel free to send any of us messages about this, and we'd be happy to answer you. And see you all next week.
Cheers,
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.